Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some fantasy series that I won't be continuing on with. All of these are currently DNFs. There are a few of them that I could see potentially picking up again in the future, maybe trying the rest of the series from the library, but the more and more series that I'm starting, the more I kind of have to sit back and reflect on which ones I want to really prioritize, which ones I really fell in love with just from the first couple installments or the very first book, and then maybe not really stress too much about continuing on with some of these. So it's not to say that I think all of these are absolutely terrible and I hated them or anything. It's just ones that maybe aren't as much to my liking. Before jumping into it, a big thank you to Book of the Month for working with me on today's video. So a lot of you know Book of the Month is an online book subscription service where you can choose a book every single month that's always a brand new hardcover from a variety of different authors and genres. If you've heard of Book of the Month before but never given it a try and wanted to, December is a good month to give it a go because new members can get their first book for just $5 with the code WONDER. The books this month include a romance called Kiss Her Once for Me. Cozy up with this delightful holiday tale as old as time. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy's sister, who she loves. You can also choose the historical fantasy Babel, Knowledge is Power, and this potent Oxford set tale about the magic of translation and the tumult of revolution. There's also a thriller called All the Dangerous Things. Since her son went missing, Isabella Drake can't sleep. After reading this thriller, you might not be able to either. There's also a historical fiction called The Circus Train. All the world's a stage in this moving World War II story about a traveling circus and finding your path in dark times. And then last, there's a literary fiction called The Light Pirate. Life and hope find a way to muddle through the levees break and the water surges in this meditative novel. A big thank you to Book of the Month for working with me, and now on to the rest of the video. Jumping into it, I feel kind of bad because I just set up like, oh, I didn't dislike these, and then the first one I'm mentioning is one that I feel like a lot of people were a little bit disappointed in, and that would be Book of Night by Holly Black. I don't think I was as disappointed by this as some other people. I just found that while I really quite liked the potential of this magic system, I didn't love how slightly convoluted certain plot points were, how the magic itself worked, but I thought that there was so much there. It was so interesting. It has to do with shadows, if you don't know. And I thought that the way that it was tied to our own world and how would society react to the discovery of this magic, all of that I really liked. I did find though that the first one was a little bit of a bumpy road for me, and I thought, well, if it's the first book in a series, because it is a pretty short book, then I can kind of treat it almost like a prequel, and then maybe the rest of the series will pick up from there. But I mentioned this in a recent video that from what I can tell, it's actually only going to have one more book, and I just don't know that I care that much to continue on. After that, we have Black Sun. The sequel would be Fevered Star. This came out this year, and I really liked Black Sun. I was really surprised by it. It was a very gripping read. It was very intense. It has one of the most intense openings of a book that I've ever read. The world itself was really interesting as well. It was really fascinating, and I liked that it was a slightly different fantasy setting than what we usually see, or the inspirations were a little different than what we typically get. I also liked the character interactions and the characters themselves in the first book. And then in the second book, I didn't mind the beginning. The end of the first book is one of those, oh my gosh, so much happened all at once and then it just ended. And so I wasn't minding the beginning of the second book, kind of taking its time, setting the pieces. And then where the pieces were and some of what I liked about the first book did not feel present in that second book, and specifically as a result of the pieces being in such drastically different places. We kind of missed some of those character interactions that we had from book one, and then where things left off, I was excited at the potential of what could come next, but I also was just so frustrated by that second book that I don't know if I want to continue on. Next up would be The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. So of course this is not one single series. This is a collection of different series that are connected, but I don't plan on continuing on with any more of Realm of the Elderlings. I loved Ship of Magic a lot. I adored that book. It was one of my favorite books of the year, And I was so excited because I had heard that Live Ship and Farseer are drastically different from one another in how they're told, the characters that you are focusing on, the fact that one of them really only focuses on one character in first person perspective, another one has a cast of characters in third person. And I didn't love Farseer. I actually DNF'd Assassin's Quest, so you can consider that another series I won't be continuing on with. And I was trying to read Assassin's Quest while reading through Live Ships because I was enjoying seeing the crossover that you get between them. But while I appreciated what I thought were the intentions and the themes that Robin Hobb was showing throughout Live Ship Traders, the execution of those were not to my liking. And it was so much so that it actually, every time I thought back on the series, I found I was thinking about it with a lot of frustration, a lot of, it sounds weird to say, but a lot of anger, which is very dramatic. But the themes are so heavy. They're the kinds of things that, in a sense, I feel like she did her job, making you feel uncomfortable, making you angry, making you hate some of these characters and hate the way certain things occur. And I think that is definitely, a compliment to her writing, but I just really, really, really didn't care for how she went about it. I don't think that diminishes from her ability as a writer. I think she's a great writer. It's just, I don't know that I care for how she delivers things. So I finished Live Ship, and I just, like I said, every time I reflected on it, it made me more and more frustrated. And then when I would pick up Assassin's Quest, I was like, I don't care anymore. I don't want to be in this world anymore. So I'm definitely sad. I'm definitely disappointed because of how much I loved Ship of Magic. Definitely with how much I loved seeing those characters throughout the story, seeing those character interactions. But ultimately, I just think that having tried at this point, having completed 5 of her books and trying 6 of them and only loving 1 and not really loving 3 and then pretty actively disliking 1, I just don't know that I'm going to find that I love more books in this series. Absolutely, completely different, as different probably as you can get for 2 different stories that fall under the category of fantasy. The next would be Guild, but it's Guild, Glint, Glow, and then other things that start with a G for the rest of the series. And this is a King Midas retelling, and the first one feels very incomplete. It almost kind of just feels like a prequel. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll read the next one just so I can give it a fair try. And I read the next one and I was like, everything's so on the nose and everything's so obvious, like what's going to happen. And the character's progression that's not as nuanced as maybe I would like, even though I appreciated what I think the author was trying to show. It felt so similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is another series that I didn't finish. The arcs of the characters just felt almost identical. The character types throughout the story felt very similar. And then I started the third one, and I didn't finish the third one, so I DNF'd the third book in that series, but then also the series itself. Sticking with things that are popular on Book Talk and more fantasy romance centered, I will not be continuing on with A Game of Fate. I think it's the Hades Saga. If you saw my reaction to it, it's a little more smut and a little less plot than what I typically like. I am excited to branch out and try different subgenres of fantasy. I have really been enjoying branching out and trying different subgenres of fantasy. This was not one for me. And then with Kingdom of the Wicked, this one is not super smutty. In fact, this is one where the way that people describe Kingdom of the Wicked, I was under the impression it was going to be a little bit more steamy, or at the very least tension-filled. And I actually liked the very beginning because I'm like, oh, it's kind of like a murder mystery and then also fantasy historical fiction story. And I was excited about that. I was excited about how different it was than what I had expected. And then I feel like the mystery element to it kind of a little bit went out the window. Some things happened that felt sort of plot convenience-y, and then that's a very great way to articulate that. There's just certain things that felt almost like Deus Ex Machina. And then also, I didn't really feel like the parameters of the magic were as established as I would have liked. It wasn't a soft enough magic system where I could just kind of be like, all right, this is just magic. And it also wasn't a hard enough magic system to where I felt like the rules were very clear. It existed somewhere in the middle in a way that sort of kind of irritated me, because I was like, I thought that this made this impossible. I thought this negated this, but I guess it doesn't. So I guess there's a problem now. But it felt like we were told that this wasn't possible. So now it feels like I have been betrayed a little bit by the rules that I thought were established, but I guess not. Anyway, so that happened. And then also the, I guess, romance that's in the first book, I thought was not engaging in a way that I enjoyed. There are some stories, like The Bridge Kingdom, I actually did like the tension between those characters, and that's a fantasy romance series. And then Half a Soul, the sweetness and the cuteness and the banter between those characters is truly adorable. And then this it wasn't really tension filled, and it wasn't sweet and adorable. So I'm like, why does everybody talk about this like it's super like this love story is like, oh my gosh, wrath. Anyway, I'm not finishing that series. That's the point. Next up are two books that I definitely think, by me not being in the target demographic, that played a big role, and that would be Violet Made of Thorns and The Darkening. Both of these, the way that the characters behaved, their interactions with other characters, and the directions the plots took, everything would happen very, very quickly, and I think that makes sense because it is a different age range. It's young adult, it's not adult, and I'm not a young adult. Well, I am, but I'm not 12 to 18. So I just think that faster pace, I really do like the slower going stories, which is why Robin Hobb should be perfect for me. But anyway, I do like more nuance, taking a lot of time to reflect on things, get to know the world, all the intricacies that you get with these giant worlds and the politics. I like all of that. Those stories that's not what they were. And so it's just not something that I found. I wasn't quite connecting to the world. I wasn't quite connecting to the magic. And of course, there are still the occasional young adult books that I pick up that are about as angsty or about as tension-filled and ridiculous and over the top as can be, and I end up eating them up. And it's just sometimes it clicks and other times it doesn't. And for both of these two, they just didn't really click for me. I also don't plan currently on continuing on with Brigid Kemmerer's Defend the Dawn. So I read this not too long ago. It was the sequel to Defy the Night, and they were both enjoyable. I didn't dislike really anything about these, as far as I wasn't frustrated by them. I enjoyed my reading experience, but because I am, like I said at the beginning, kind of trying to narrow down what are series that I really want to prioritize, what are series that really grip me and that I want to continue on with, or series that really fascinate me, really intrigue me, or doing something really different with the genre. I am not finding that this series is exactly fitting that, but this is one that I could see maybe if I'm perusing the library shelves and I see it when the third book comes out. Maybe I'll give that third book a go. It was fun, but it's just not anything that's really sitting with me and sticking with me. Similarly, I may continue on with this series, I may not. For now, I'm actually leaning in the maybe not category, and that would be Rook and Rose. The first is Mask of Mirrors. I really liked the first book quite a bit. It is this essentially fantasy version of Venice, and we have two characters that in some ways are kind of like Batman and Catwoman. A little bit. They remind me of those characters. And the world, the way that the magic is tied to the city feels very alive. The way that the magic itself kind of is tied to the different classes within the city. And then the way that we see one of our main characters trying to con her way into a noble house. And in doing that, how she's finding herself tied to the house wars, basically, in the city. It was all very, very gripping. was also very heavy on the fantasy elements. The names themselves are not the easiest to keep track of. There's a lot of different characters, and I was really excited about that in the first book, and I really was excited to kind of sink my teeth in. And then in the second book, I found that the plot felt very episodic, which I didn't mind necessarily, but I kind of wished that we had the opportunity to, now that we've settled into this world where you kind of feel like you're even further sinking yourself in, you're getting more caught up in the politics or the inner workings of this house war, in the way that people are trying to constantly scheme against one another. And it had that to some degree, but it also kind of felt like we get little plots, and then we get another little plot, and then we get another little plot, and we're introduced to this person, we're introduced to this person, now we're getting this person. And with a world as complex as this one, I wasn't really wanting to keep getting something new. I kind of wanted to just continue on and enjoy what I'd already had presented to me in the first book. But it's still a really fascinating world, and I do enjoy these characters. I found that there was a slight strangeness to the tone of certain characters. Sometimes certain characters would be almost sultry and mysterious, and they really pulled you in. And then other times they were kind of cute and wholesome. And it'd be the same character, but from one chapter to the next, they didn't always feel like the same person. And in a story where you have so many different characters, in a story where some people are trying to figure out other characters and they're trying to learn their secrets, to have that character not intentionally be shifting a little bit in how they behave, but it just felt like they were a little bit different from one chapter to the next, that also pulled me out a little bit. I do like this world a lot though, and I do find the characters to be really fun to see, but whether or not I continue on right now, we'll see. But anyway, let me know what are some books or what are some series that you are also on the fence about. What are some that are pretty concrete no? Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.